The act of budgeting allows you to put the peg in what causes and what outcomes you expect, and then when you're looking at your financial results, you can compare them to what you thought would happen and see if you can tweak certain aspects of your next steps. Well, there's two ways people look at budgeting. Some people like to do zero-based budgeting, which assumes that you're starting from zero and saying, based on here, what would happen. I think there are circumstances where that makes sense. I'm not a big proponent of zero-based budgeting in isolation. There are elements of your budget that you can take a zero-based approach. But if you're an existing business that has a track record and has a history, it's incumbent upon you to look at that history and think of the budget as the progression of your business, because a business, like a person, has a lifespan and a life cycle. And so when you're budgeting, if you take into consideration your history, you have a better chance of understanding where you're likely to go. But if you're a brand new business that doesn't have a history, then you've just got to consider what you're trying to achieve, who you're trying to reach, what were the things that made you think that this was a viable business, and break them down into their component parts and try to get some kind of an idea of where you're likely to end up. And as I often say to business people who really struggle with this, it's your best guess, man. Like, there's nothing wrong with guessing and being wrong, as long as you've put the right amount of thought into that guessing and contemplated all of the different factors and can lay out why you believe that this is a good guess. Then you're probably going to be better for it no matter what the outcome is. I'm never going to advocate the fly by the seat of the pants as opposed to good solid planning. I get that sometimes it's time crunch. I get that sometimes you can't do the exhaustive process. The challenge I have with some people who resist planning is the all or nothing. I either do this incredibly elaborate, super detailed plan, or I don't do a plan at all. There's always a balance, and there's always time for planning. There's a conversation theme that comes up time and again, and that's benchmarking. I mean, on the question of marketing, or on the question of how much I should spend on any other of the attributes of my business, if you're not looking at the whole, it's very hard to answer that question. Because a business that's product cost is 50% should probably spend less on marketing than a business whose product cost is 10%. However, what the remaining 50% of their costs are will dictate what they have available to spend on marketing and still make a profit. And likewise for the company that only has a 10% product cost. But the effectiveness of your marketing is equally important when you're determining how much you should be spending, because if you're spending 15% of your budget on ineffective marketing versus spending 15% of your budget on effective marketing, it's got a very different outcome. So it can't be looked at in isolation. Take the marketing budget as a good example for proxy for measuring how effective you were at budgeting. If you said, well, if I spend 15% of my marketing budget, I should be able to attract a certain number of clients, again, with a certain amount of spend. When you finish the period and you look at how many people purchased and you look at what their average spend was, you can compare that to what you spent in order to get that. And then you can tweak whether or not that was the right amount, or whether, geez, if I spent a little bit more, I might have gotten a little bit more out of them, or if I spent a little bit less, I would have gotten the same result. It's a journey and it's an iterative process. You should not assume you're going to get it right the first time. Put in the time to do a budget right, and that doesn't mean time in terms of quantity of time. It means the first stage to getting a good budget is understanding the drivers of your business. So if you're a service business that has a client base that's easily identifiable in terms of who spends what, then you should say, well, okay, I need 50 customers to spend $50, and I'm going to get to my revenue number of $2,500. Or you should say, could I do that with 10 customers spending $250? So if you know the drivers, you're in a much better position to budget. So budgeting isn't about top line. I know a lot of executives who just give you a top line number. We did $10 this year, we're going to do $15 next year. Do you know what gave you the $10? So I'd say if you're going to approach budgeting with an intent to get budgeting right, you should know what drives my costs, what drives my revenues.